Since the dawn of humanity, we've told stories of creatures that lurk in the shadows, soar across the skies, or rise from the ashes. Myths that explained the unexplainable, and monsters that embodied our deepest fears and hopes. Tonight, we'll journey into the legends of 5 of the most famous mythical creatures in the world, creatures that still haunt our imagination today. Imagine standing on a battlefield centuries ago. The ground shakes. The sky darkens. And then, above the smoke, you see it, a massive beast with scales like armor, wings that blot out the sun, and eyes glowing like fire. It opens its jaws, and with a single breath, flames consume everything in sight. You are facing a dragon. Dragons have haunted humanity's imagination for thousands of years. And what's fascinating is that almost every civilization on Earth told stories of dragon-like creatures. But here's the twist: these dragons weren't always the same. In the West, they were monsters to be slain. In the East, they were gods to be revered. In ancient China, dragons weren't winged beasts of destruction. They were serpentine beings of water and air, rainbringers, cloud shapers, and guardians of rivers. Far from evil, they were symbols of fortune, prosperity, and wisdom. Emperors claimed to be descendants of dragons, and to this day, dragon dances light up Chinese New Year celebrations. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, dragons were the stuff of nightmares. Fire-breathing monsters that hoarded gold, kidnapped princesses, and laid waste to villages. Heroes became legends by slaying them, like St. George, who struck down a dragon to save a city. For Europeans, the dragon was chaos incarnate, a beast of greed and destruction. But why do dragons appear in so many cultures that had no contact with each other? From the Norse dragon Nhggr, gnawing at the roots of the world tree, to the 8-headed Yamata no Orochi in Japan, to the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica. It's almost as if humans around the globe dreamed of the same creature. Some believe dragons represent our primal fears: snakes, predators, storms, and fire. Others think ancient people discovered dinosaur fossils and imagined they belonged to monstrous beasts. The contrast between East and West is striking. In Europe, dragons stood for greed and evil, forces to be destroyed. In Asia, they brought rain and life, forces to be respected. One was chaos, the other was balance. And that duality shows us how myths reflect the values and struggles of the people who told them. So, are dragons real? Maybe not in flesh and blood. But in myth, in art, in stories across every continent, they've always been real. Dragons embody our deepest fears and greatest dreams, reminding us of the eternal battle between chaos and order. And as long as we keep telling stories, dragons will never die. They'll keep rising from the ashes of imagination, breathing fire into our legends. And where dragons breathe fire, our next creature is born from it. A bird of flame and eternal rebirth, the legendary phoenix. Imagine a bird so radiant it glows like fire. When it grows old, it bursts into flames, only to rise again from its own ashes. Immortal, eternal, forever reborn. This is the phoenix. Unlike dragons, which appear as terrifying monsters in some cultures, the phoenix has always been a symbol of hope. It represents rebirth, renewal, and the eternal cycle of life and death. The story of the phoenix begins in ancient Egypt. They spoke of the Bennu bird, linked to the sun god Re, which rose with the dawn and symbolized creation and resurrection. The Greeks later adopted the legend, calling it the phoenix, believing it lived for hundreds of years before igniting into fire and being reborn from the ashes. Early Christians saw the phoenix as a symbol of resurrection and eternal life. It wasn't a creature of fear, it was a promise that no ending is truly final. The phoenix is usually described as a magnificent bird, sometimes golden, sometimes crimson, shining like the sun itself. Legends say it sings a hauntingly beautiful song before bursting into flames, and from the ashes, a young phoenix emerges. It has always stood for renewal, whether it's seasons, empires, or personal transformation. Where the dragon is chaos, the phoenix is hope. Cities destroyed by war have called themselves phoenixes when rebuilt. Atlanta, Georgia, uses the phoenix as a symbol after its destruction in the Civil War. In modern Russia and Lebanon, the phoenix represents survival through hardship. In pop culture, the phoenix is everywhere. Fox, the loyal bird in Harry Potter, who heals with his tears, Marvel's Jean Grey, known as the Dark Phoenix, even in games like Assassin's Creed, the phoenix's rebirth made flesh. The phoenix is more than just a myth, it's an idea, a reminder that no matter how great the fire, from the ashes we can rise again. It speaks to something deep in human nature, the desire to endure, to survive, to transform. But if the phoenix is eternal life, our next creature represents eternal death, monsters who walk the night, feeding on the living. Enter the world of the vampire. They sleep in coffins. They fear the sun. And when darkness falls, they hunger for blood. The vampire, one of the most enduring and terrifying creatures in mythology. But behind the Hollywood image of fangs and velvet capes lies something much older. A myth that has haunted humanity for centuries. The first vampires didn't sparkle, and they weren't seductive aristocrats. In Eastern Europe, folklore told of bloated, corpse-like revenants who rose from the grave to feed on the living. In Romania, they were called strigoi. In Greece, they were vrikalakas. These were monsters born from fear of death, disease, and the unknown. Even Vlad the Impaler, whose cruelty gave rise to Bram Stoker's Dracula, was said to have inspired the vampire legend. Vampires have always shared the same terrifying traits: they drink blood, avoid sunlight, and can only be destroyed with a stake through the heart. Garlic, holy water, and silver became weapons in the fight against them. But at their core, vampires reflect two human fears: the fear of death, and the fear of things that refuse to stay dead. In 1897, Bram Stoker's Dracula transformed the vampire into the elegant, charismatic monster we know today. From there, vampires entered every corner of culture, and Rice's Interview with the Vampire, The Vampire Diaries, Twilight, Castlevania. Sometimes horrifying, sometimes romantic, the vampire has become a mirror of our deepest desires: eternal youth, immortality, forbidden passion. The vampire is both monster and metaphor, an eternal predator lurking in the shadows, feeding not only on our blood but on our fears. And if vampires stalk the night, what happens when the danger comes from within, when man himself becomes the beast? Let's talk about werewolves. A full moon rises. Somewhere in the forest, a man screams as his body twists and reshapes. His teeth sharpen, his hands become claws, and fur spreads across his skin. By nightfall, he is no longer human, he is a werewolf. The legend of man transforming into wolf is one of humanity's oldest and most frightening stories. The word comes from Old English, wer meaning man, and wolf meaning wolf. In ancient Greece, the tale of King Lycaon told how he angered Zeus and was cursed to become a wolf. In Norse sagas, berserkers wore wolfskins and were said to channel the spirit of the animal in battle. But in medieval Europe, the werewolf became a symbol of fear. Men and women were tried and executed as werewolves, accused of making pacts with the devil or of hunting children in the night. Legends differ: some say you become a werewolf after being bitten, others say it's a curse passed through blood, or even a punishment for sin. But the result is always the same: loss of control, the human spirit consumed by the animal within. The werewolf is terrifying not only because it's a monster, but because it was once a person. It asks the question, what if we all have a beast hiding inside us? The werewolf has stalked our imagination for centuries. From the 1941 film The Wolfman to Harry Potter's Remus Lupin, to Teen Wolf and Twilight, the legend continues to evolve. Sometimes tragic, sometimes terrifying, but always symbolic of the primal, uncontrollable side of humanity. The werewolf is more than a monster, it's a metaphor for rage, loss of control, and the darkness inside us all. But not all legends stalk the land. Some dwell in the deep oceans, waiting with tentacles large enough to drag ships beneath the waves. Let's meet the Kraken. You're sailing across the sea. The water is calm, the sky is clear. And then suddenly, the waves rise, and from the depths, massive tentacles break the surface, curling around the ship and pulling it down into darkness. You've just met the Kraken. The Kraken is one of the ocean's greatest legends, a sea monster that has terrified sailors for centuries. In Norse mythology, stories from the 13th century describe the Kraken as a colossal creature living off the coasts of Norway and Greenland. It was said to be so large it could be mistaken for an island. Sailors warned that it would rise from the deep, wrap its tentacles around a ship, and drag it beneath the waves. The Kraken was more than just a monster, it was the embodiment of the sea itself. Vast, mysterious, and deadly. For sailors who risked their lives in uncharted waters, the Kraken was the perfect symbol of the unknown lurking below. And while the myth may sound impossible, it's not entirely fantasy. Today we know of giant squids that can reach over 40 feet in length, creatures that live in the deep ocean, rarely seen by humans. Perhaps, when one of these squids surfaced centuries ago, sailors believed they had encountered the Kraken itself. The Kraken continues to inspire terror and fascination. It appears in epic tales like Clash of the Titans, terrorizes Jack Sparrow and Pirates of the Caribbean, and surfaces in video games like Sea of Thieves. Even now, it represents the power and mystery of the deep sea. The Kraken reminds us that the ocean is still largely unexplored, and that sometimes, our greatest fears come not from fantasy but from the real creatures waiting in the dark waters below. From dragons to phoenixes, from vampires to werewolves, and from the depths of the sea to the fire of the sky, these mythical creatures are more than just stories. They are mirrors of our fears, our hopes, and our imagination. And as long as humanity dreams, these legends will never die.